18 seconds. From the moment the lead blocker vehicle came to a full stop to the moment of impact, the driver had 18 seconds to decide the fate of his crew, his vehicle, and the $5 million in negotiable bearer bonds secured in the rear compartment. In that sliver of time, a mundane stretch of urban industrial roadway, indistinguishable from 1,000 others, was methodically transformed into a technically perfect ambush envelope. What happened inside those 18 seconds was not a gunfight. It was a contest of wills, a brutal intersection of meticulous enemy planning and one man's refusal to comply with the logic of his own destruction. This is not a story of heroism. It is a clinical dissection of a decision. It is an analysis of the moment when training transcends procedure, and a human being becomes a more effective weapon than the $500,000 machine he commands. In the specialized world of high-value asset transport, we have a saying: the vehicle is your weapon, your shield, and your coffin. It is designed to perform all three functions with equal proficiency. The driver's ultimate responsibility is to correctly identify which function is required at any given moment. For this crew, on this day, the 18 seconds they were allotted would force their operator to make that choice. His decision, and the violent outcome it precipitated, stands as a stark testament to the principle that in a lethal force encounter, the most sophisticated armor and the most detailed protocols are secondary to the quality of the mind they are designed to protect. The enemy built a perfect cage. The driver, in a singular act of calculated aggression, chose to use his vehicle not as a shield to hide behind, but as the hammer to break it. The operation itself was a model of logistical tedium, what the industry designates a sweep run. This involves a predetermined route with multiple collection points, in this case 3 separate banking institutions within a single metropolitan district. The armored truck, a 10-ton diesel-powered Citadel on wheels, was making its final pickup before returning to the central depot. The inherent vulnerability of any sweep run is its predictability. While the exact timing might vary by minutes, the route itself becomes a known quantity. Over weeks and months, patterns emerge. Patterns that are invisible to the crew executing their daily tasks, but become glaringly obvious to a patient and dedicated observer. A disciplined adversary does not need a spy. They need a stopwatch, a map, and a notebook. The attackers in this case had all three, and something more. The asset was a purpose-built cash-in-transit vehicle manufactured by a specialized security firm in Northern Europe. Its official designation was a civilian classification, but its architecture was purely military. The chassis was reinforced, the engine compartment was protected by a steel cage, and the crew cabin was a monocoque box of hardened ballistic steel and composite armor. It carried a B6 armor rating, meaning it could reliably defeat multiple impacts from high-powered rifle rounds up to 7.62 mm full metal jacket ammunition. The glass, a laminated polycarbonate and leaded glass composite nearly 2 inches thick, offered the same level of protection. But B6 armor is a compromise, not a panacea. It adds immense weight, stressing the engine, suspension, and brakes. More critically, it is not impervious. While it stops penetration, the kinetic energy of a rifle round striking the interior surface of the armor can cause a dangerous phenomenon known as spalling, where fragments of the armor itself are blasted inward at high velocity, becoming secondary projectiles. The glass can be spiderwebbed and clouded by repeated impacts, blinding the driver. The vehicle was a fortress, but every fortress has its limitations. It was equipped with a suite of defensive systems. The tires were military-grade run flats, capable of operating for at least 30 miles at reduced speed after being completely deflated. An internal fire suppression system could flood the engine and crew compartments with halon gas. The doors were secured with electronically controlled deadbolts that required a signal from the central depot to be opened from the outside, once the run was initiated. It was, by all technical measures, a state-of-the-art platform for its intended purpose. It was designed to withstand a conventional smash-and-grab robbery, to absorb punishment, and to create a window of time for law enforcement to arrive. It was not, however, designed to fight its way out of a military-style ambush. That was a function left entirely to the discretion of the human beings inside. The crew consisted of 3 individuals. In the rear, a cargo guard, a 6-year veteran responsible for the asset itself. In the front passenger seat, a communications guard, responsible for maintaining contact with the depot and coordinating emergency response. And in the driver's seat, the protagonist of this analysis, a man with 15 years of experience in the executive protection and armored transport sectors. His background included extensive training in evasive driving, counter-ambush tactics, and threat recognition. He was not merely a driver. He was a security operator whose primary tool happened to be a steering wheel. His professional history was one of quiet, unremarkable competence. He had never discharged his weapon in the line of duty. He had never been in a serious accident. His record was a testament to the ideal outcome of every run: utter uneventfulness. That record was about to be permanently altered. The ultimate catalyst for the day's events was not tactical or mechanical. It was systemic. A post-incident investigation revealed a catastrophic intelligence failure within the security provider's corporate structure. A mid-level logistics coordinator, compromised by a gambling debt, had been selling operational schedules to a fixer for a major trafficking organization for over 3 months. The sweep run's route, timing, and cargo manifest were not merely predicted. They were known quantities. The attackers were not guessing where the truck would be. They had a printed itinerary. This breach rendered much of the operational security planning irrelevant. The crew was driving a technologically advanced fortress, but their enemy had been given the blueprints and the timetable. They were moving unknowingly into a kill zone that had been custom-built just for them. To understand the engagement, one must first understand the adversary. The team that executed this ambush was not a collection of common criminals. Forensic analysis of the scene, coupled with intelligence gathered after their capture, painted a picture of a highly professional and disciplined unit. Their equipment, tactics, and execution were indicative of military or special operations training. They were armed with military-grade rifles, equipped with optical sights, and they used standardized communications gear. They moved with an economy of motion that spoke of extensive rehearsal. This was not a robbery. It was a targeted military action conducted on civilian soil. Their objective was the $5 million in bearer bonds, a liquid and untraceable asset perfect for funding their organization's other illicit activities. Their choice of location was tactically brilliant. They selected a 2-lane road in a light industrial park, flanked on one side by a high retaining wall and on the other by a row of windowless warehouses. There were no intersecting streets for a quarter of a mile in either direction. This created a perfect channel, a natural funnel that eliminated any possibility of the target vehicle turning around or diverting onto a side street. It was an ambush box. The time of day, late afternoon, meant minimal traffic and no pedestrian witnesses. Furthermore, the location was precisely calculated to be at the outer edge of the 10-minute response radius for the nearest police precinct. The attackers knew that from the moment the first shot was fired, they would own the space for at least 10 minutes, an eternity in a close-quarters engagement. The plan was a classic L-shaped ambush. A stolen sedan would act as the blocker vehicle, pulling out in front of the armored truck and feigning a breakdown to bring it to a halt. The main assault element, positioned along the side of the road, would then initiate the attack, focusing overwhelming fire on the driver's side of the crew cabin. A third element, a chase vehicle, was positioned 100 yards behind, ready to close the trap and prevent any attempt at retreat. The entire setup was designed to force the target into a static defensive posture. The armored truck would stop. The crew would take cover inside their steel box and they would call for help. The attackers would then have the time they needed to breach the vehicle, likely using specialized cutting tools or explosives, and seize the cargo. This plan was technically sound, meticulously rehearsed, and tactically proficient. It had only one critical and ultimately fatal flaw. The entire operational concept was predicated on a single assumption: that the driver of the armored truck would follow standard operating procedure. Standard operating procedure in this scenario dictates that the vehicle, when faced with an impassable and potentially hostile obstacle, should stop at a safe distance, assess the situation, and radio for instructions and backup. The vehicle's armor is meant to be used as static cover. The crew is trained to be defensive, to outlast the threat, not to confront it. The attackers had built their plan around this doctrine of compliance. They anticipated a passive, reactive target. Their intellectual arrogance, their failure to account for an operator who would reject the established rules of the game, was the vulnerability that would unravel their entire operation. At 6:47 p.m. and 18 seconds, the event began. The driver saw the blue sedan pull out from a concealed loading bay approximately 150 yards ahead. It drove slowly for a moment, then shuddered to a halt, positioned perfectly to block both lanes of the narrow road. The hazard lights began to blink. This was the first test. For an ordinary driver, this is an inconvenience. For a security professional, it is a red flag, an anomaly demanding immediate scrutiny. The driver's mind initiated a process that security professionals know as the OODA loop, a decision-making cycle developed by military strategist John Boyd. Observe, orient, decide, act. It is a framework for thinking and reacting in high-stakes, time-sensitive environments. First, observe. The driver's eyes scanned the scene, absorbing data. A four-door sedan. No visible damage. Two men exiting the vehicle. They were not dressed as mechanics. They moved with purpose, not distress. One opened the trunk. The other scanned back down the road directly at the approaching truck. His posture was not that of a stranded motorist. The driver's focus flicked to his side mirrors. He noted a dark sport utility vehicle behind him, maintaining an unusually consistent distance. His observations took less than 3 seconds. Normalcy bias, the human tendency to believe that a situation is safe and familiar even when evidence suggests otherwise, was screaming that this was a simple breakdown. His training was screaming that it was a trap. Second, orient. This is the most critical phase of the loop. It is where raw data is contextualized and analyzed based on experience and training. The driver oriented the observed facts against his mental library of threat indicators. The location, a perfect kill zone. The blocker vehicle, a classic ambush technique. The occupant's behavior, tactical, not civilian. The trailing vehicle, a potential rear guard or chase element. He cross-referenced this with his vehicle's state: 10 tons of mass, moving at 35 miles per hour. B6 armor, run flat tires. He also oriented on the standard operating procedure, which was clear: stop, report, wait. But he also oriented on the consequences of that procedure. Stopping would cede the initiative entirely to the attackers. It would turn his mobile fortress into a static coffin. It would make them a fixed target, allowing the enemy to concentrate fire, disable the vehicle, and begin a methodical breach. In this context, the standard procedure was a suicide pact. Third, decide. This was the moment of truth. The distance to the blocker was closing. He had perhaps 5 seconds left to commit to a course of action. The choice was binary. Option A, comply. Follow procedure, stop the vehicle, and trust the armor to hold until help arrived. help he knew was at least 10 minutes away. Option B, escalate. Reject the premise of the ambush. Refuse to be a static target. Use the vehicle not as a shield, but as a weapon. The decision was made. His passenger guard reported later that the driver uttered no words. His knuckles simply whitened on the steering wheel, and his foot, which had been hovering over the brake, moved decisively to the accelerator. Fourth act. The decision translated into immediate, violent action. The truck's diesel engine roared as he depressed the accelerator to the floor. The vehicle, already moving at a steady clip, began to gain speed. It was no longer a transport vehicle. It was a 10-ton battering ram aimed at the heart of the ambush. At 6:47 and 21 seconds, the attackers realized their target was not complying. The man who had been at the trunk of the sedan now held a rifle. The first shot was fired. It was a single, aimed shot striking the driver's side of the windshield. The bullet, a 5.56 millimeter round, flattened against the ballistic glass, creating a bright, spider-webbed starburst a foot from the driver's face. This was the psychological disruption phase of their attack. It is intended to shock, to disorient, to induce panic, and force the target to stop. It had the opposite effect. The impact served as the final violent confirmation of the driver's assessment. He was no longer reacting to a potential threat. He was engaged with a confirmed hostile force. At 6:47 and 24 seconds, the main assault element opened fire. From the side of the road, at least 4 more rifles erupted. The sound inside the cabin was not the sharp crack of gunfire, but a deafening, percussive roar, like giant hail striking a metal roof. A storm of bullets hammered the driver's side of the vehicle. Impacts stitched a line across the windshield and the driver's door. The ballistic glass began to craze and turn opaque as multiple layers were compromised. Inside, the crew could hear the distinct ping and thud of rounds striking steel. A round impacted the armor just beside the driver's head, and a small, razor-sharp flake of steel, spalling, was blasted from the interior wall, inflicting a minor laceration on his cheek. He ignored it. The purpose of this volley was suppressive fire. It is not necessarily meant to kill, but to degrade the target's ability to react. It forces them to take cover, to stop moving, to cease any effective counteraction. The attackers were operating from their playbook, and their playbook said that under this volume of fire, the truck would stop. But the truck did not stop. It continued to accelerate, now reaching nearly 50 miles per hour. It was a moving, accelerating wall of steel, and it was closing the 75 yards to the blocker vehicle with terrifying speed. The fatal zone, the area where the attackers could bring the most effective fire to bear, was shrinking with every second. At 6:47 and 27 seconds, the attackers at the blocker vehicle realized their imminent danger. They had expected to be shooters, not targets. They abandoned their positions and scrambled for cover. It was too late. The driver held his line, aiming for the center mass of the sedan. His vision through the damaged windshield was a mosaic of fractured glass, but he could still see his target. The physics of the impending collision were non-negotiable. An object with a mass of approximately 20,000 pounds, traveling at 73 feet per second, was about to collide with a stationary object with a mass of 4,000 pounds. The outcome was preordained. The impact, at 6:47 and 36 seconds, was an event of pure mechanical violence. The armored truck's reinforced bumper struck the sedan just behind the driver's door. For a fraction of a second, the two vehicles became one. The sedan's chassis crumpled, its safety cage collapsing as if made of cardboard. The kinetic energy of the truck was transferred catastrophically, lifting the smaller vehicle off the ground and throwing it aside. The armored truck barely slowed. It plowed through the wreckage, the sound of tearing metal screaming through the cabin. The driver fought the wheel as the truck bucked and swerved, its front left tire now shredded by the debris. The run-flat tire immediately began to do its job, the reinforced sidewall taking the immense weight of the vehicle. The truck was through the blockade. The primary element of the ambush had been physically breached and psychologically shattered. The driver did not slow down. He knew about the chase vehicle. In his mirror, a distorted view through the damaged rear window, he could see the dark sport utility vehicle accelerating to pursue. But here, the attackers' own plan worked against them. Their pursuit was now blocked by the mangled wreckage of their own sedan. This gave the armored truck a crucial head start of several seconds. The driver maintained his acceleration, putting as much distance as possible between his vehicle and the kill zone. The chase was brief and ineffective. The damaged truck, running on one flat tire and with its engine likely sustaining damage, was still a formidable obstacle. The attackers, their plan in ruins and their element of surprise gone, fired a few parting shots before breaking off the pursuit, likely realizing that responding law enforcement was now an imminent threat. The total duration of the engagement, from the first shot fired to the truck clearing the immediate kill zone, was less than 45 seconds. In that time, an estimated 200 rounds of rifle ammunition had been fired at the vehicle. The result, 0 penetrations of the crew cabin. The armor had held. The machine had performed its function as a shield, but it was the man inside who had used it as a weapon, and that had made all the difference. The driver continued for another 2 miles before pulling into a secure commercial loading dock, a pre-planned emergency safe point. Only then, with the vehicle secured and the threat gone, was the call made to the depot and to law enforcement. The aftermath was a study in controlled chaos. The armored truck was, for all practical purposes, functionally destroyed. Its front end was a mangled wreck from the collision. The engine block was cracked, and all fluids had drained onto the pavement. Every single pane of ballistic glass on the vehicle was compromised, shattered, and opaque. All 4 tires on the driver's side were shredded, either by gunfire or debris from the collision. The steel body was pockmarked with dozens of bullet impacts. The asset, however, was completely secure. The cargo compartment had not been breached. The $5 million in bearer bonds were untouched. The human cost was minimal, a testament to the vehicle's design and the driver's actions. The driver himself had a minor cut on his cheek from the spalling and whiplash from the impact. The passenger guard sustained a sprained wrist from bracing against the dashboard. The rear guard was unharmed. All 3 were alive, a result that would have been statistically improbable had the driver chosen to follow standard procedure and remain static in the kill zone. The outcome for the antagonists was significantly different. The 2 men who had been positioned at the blocker vehicle were caught in the collision. One was killed instantly. The other sustained critical injuries and was apprehended at the scene by the first responding police units. The chaos and disorganization of their failed ambush, coupled with the evidence left behind, led to the rapid identification and capture of the entire 5-man team within 48 hours. Their return on investment for months of planning, intelligence gathering, and equipment procurement was 0. Their meticulously crafted operation had been dismantled in 18 seconds by one man's decision to drive forward. In synthesizing this event, we must look at the interplay of 3 distinct factors: technology, procedure, and the human element. The technology, the B6 armor, the run-flat tires, performed exactly as specified. It absorbed the punishment and ensured the survivability of the crew. But technology alone is passive. It buys time. It does not create solutions. It was a necessary component for survival, but it was not the decisive one. The institutional procedures, the standard operating protocols, were revealed to be a critical failure point. In this specific context, the procedure was a recipe for disaster. It encouraged a static, defensive mindset that played directly into the hands of a disciplined, aggressive adversary. This highlights a persistent danger in the security industry: the development of rigid procedures that fail to account for unconventional threats. The ultimate failure of the antagonists was psychological. They profiled their target's equipment and their target's standard procedures with near-perfect accuracy. They built a tactical problem that, according to their doctrinal playbook, had only one solution for the target: stop, defend, and wait. What they failed to profile was the human operator. They could not account for an individual whose training, experience, and mindset allowed him to see the established procedure not as a rule, but as another variable in the tactical equation, and one that he could discard. They failed to account for human willpower, for the ingrained imperative of a true professional to seize the initiative, even when it means driving directly into the heart of the threat. Their plan was tactically sound, but psychologically naive. From this incident, we can distill 4 critical lessons that have since been integrated into advanced training curricula. The first is that intelligence security is the absolute foundation of all physical security. The most advanced armored vehicle in the world is compromised if the enemy knows where it is going and when it will be there. The internal breach that provided the attackers with their schedule was the original sin of this event. Without it, the ambush would never have happened. The second lesson is a reaffirmation of a core tactical principle: static defense is death. When faced with a prepared, overwhelming force in a designated kill zone, to stop moving is to surrender control. Movement, even forward movement, into the teeth of the enemy's fire creates chaos, disrupts the enemy's plan, and forces them to react. The driver understood this implicitly. He chose to be a problem his attackers had to solve, rather than a target they could service at their leisure. His forward momentum broke their OODA loop, forcing them into a reactive posture from which they never recovered. The third lesson concerns the relationship between equipment and training. Equipment buys time, but training determines outcomes. The armor gave the driver the seconds he needed to think and to act. It kept him alive long enough to make a decision. But it was his training that provided him with the correct decision. Years of drills, simulations, and mental conditioning had forged a response that overrode the natural human instinct to flinch, to stop, to seek cover. He did not have to invent a solution under fire. His training had already provided one. The fourth and final lesson is the necessity of evolving methodology to match sophisticated threats. The cash-in-transit industry has historically been plagued by low-level, opportunistic criminals. The adversaries in this event represented a paradigm shift, a quasi-military force executing a planned, intelligence-driven operation. Security protocols designed to defeat smash-and-grab attacks are woefully inadequate against this level of threat. The entire defensive posture of the industry must shift from a passive, siege-based model to one that emphasizes proactive threat recognition and aggressive, dynamic counter-ambush strategies. In the final analysis, the event was decided by the man, not the machine he operated. The vehicle was a tool, but his decision was the fulcrum on which the outcome turned. He took a platform designed for defense and wielded it as an offensive weapon. He did so not out of recklessness, but out of a deep, practiced understanding of the tactical reality he faced. He recognized that the only way to survive the trap was to destroy it. There is a concept we teach to high-level operators called the mental bridge. It is the psychological crossing point where training becomes action, the moment when rehearsed knowledge converts into instinctual performance under extreme duress. For years, this driver practiced evasive maneuvers on closed courses. He sat through classroom sessions analyzing ambush scenarios. He mentally rehearsed these exact situations hundreds of times. This repetitive, often tedious process built the bridge. When the moment came, he did not have to consciously think his way across it. His mind, under the immense pressure of imminent death, simply ran. It ran across the bridge the training had built, from a state of shock and assessment to a state of decisive, life-saving action. That is what happened in those 18 seconds. The fight goes to those who understand that the only way out of the kill zone is through it. End of debrief.